All right, so in this screencast, we're going to deal with an issue that arises sometimes when you are cloning virtual machines, um, whether you are using an image that someone has provided for you or one that you've created yourself from another machine that you had that you were using. So let's go ahead and I've already pretty much got all my stuff, situated and ready for you guys. So basically what you want to do is you want to first go ahead and, start your virtual machine manager. If it's not running, you want to do a service libvirt d start, um, make sure it's in your check config or whatnot so that whenever you boot up your host machine that your virtual machine manager will automatically start up. And I've already got I've got a machine here running, but we're not going to use that one. What I'm going to do is go ahead and just go through the full process so you can actually see when the error arises, and then we'll go through how to fix it. So let's go ahead and create us a virtual machine, and we're just going to call this one network. And you can name yours something that you would actually use, but I'm just creating something here just for the sake of this tutorial. And here's my little image here that we're going to use. All right, go ahead and select your operating system. Actually, yes, I forgot about that. Let me choose a different. There we go. And I don't need a lot of RAM for this one. I don't want to do too much of anything. It's going to be just real basic. Now, so everything's set up here. I've named my virtual machine. I've selected the operating system and so forth, set the memory, CPUs, and all that kind of stuff. So basically, you're just going to go through the process of what I just did. A virtual machine that I've already had sitting on the side. I have an image of that virtual machine, and I'm cloning it. Basically, well, I'm not actually cloning it. What I'm actually doing is using a previously created image that at the time when I reformatted my operating system and everything, I had these disk images sitting on the side from previous virtual machines that were actually running. So this is two case scenarios where you can run into this issue that we're going to run into either when you clone a virtual machine or when you have to use a disk image to recreate a virtual machine. All right, so that's what we're doing. We're recreating a virtual machine from a disk image, but this, again, most folks run into it when they're cloning virtual machines in terms of when you're first starting out learning about virtualization. All right, so we're going to go ahead and let this do what it's going to do, which is basically just boot into our machine, because remember, this is an image that I already had. So this one's ready to go. The operating system's been installed. Everything's already ready to go on there. It's just that when I reformatted the system, it just so happened that, I didn't save any of the configurations for the virtual machine manager. All right, so we're logged in. Now, let's try to, if this fails, we're good. All right, so we just tried to ping Google, and it gave us a unknown host, google.com. Now, if you're like the, 90% of us or 99% of us, generally what you're going to do is you're going to start troubleshooting your, Etsy sysconfig network files, network scripts. I'm sorry, all those different things. Etsy hosts, etsyresolve.conf. You're going to start trying to look, in the nsswitch.conf. You're going to start trying to figure out, why am I not getting any internet connection? And I ran into the issue when I just was like, hey, I know I had this old, well, not necessarily old in terms of this longevity of old, but just, hey, I got this disk image that I want to pull back up. And I knew it was older than the latest release of the operating system that I was running. So I wanted to update it. Well, you see all that right there. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe there's just some crazy errors or whatever the case may be. So, I didn't really pay too much mind because it went by so fast. And then I was like, well, let me just go ahead and try to run it, click yes, and, let it update. And then I saw all of that errors again. I was like, oh, something's definitely not right because nothing's being installed. What's going on? So you can either stop yours early, depending on how many, mirrors and stuff like that you have set up in terms of your what you may have previously had on that virtual machine in terms of your RPM packages and your repositories and so forth. You may have a lot more errors than me. Yours may still be going, so you can Control C to stop it. So something's wrong with our network is basically the situation here, right? So I say, okay, for the heck of it, let me just restart the network and see what happens. So there's our error. All right, bringing up interface E0, device E0 does not seem to be present, delaying initialization. And of course, I knew that I had a NIC card or network interface card set up on my virtual machine because I was connected to the internet before. And even with a clone machine, prior to the clone, generally you would have, connected to the internet or had some type of internet connectivity before you clone that machine. So that was the same case I ran into. And it was quite a feat to figure out, to find, to research, and determine exactly what the problem is. And I found out a bit more information is one of the main reasons why it kind of pushed me to create this tutorial was that there's some transition between Red Hat Enterprise Linux 6 or CentOS 6 or any other derivative of the Red Hat binary, the Red Hat distribution, any other clone of that distribution, so forth, like Oracle Linux and Scientific Linux and so forth. There was a change between the version 5 and version 6, mainly dealing with the kernel. I want to say version 2.5 of the kernel or 2.6 and beyond, in the way that devices are managed or were managed. And we're talking about /dev file system. So, of course, that, sorry about that. Of course, that /dev, has all your different devices and stuff in there, right? So again, I've already been, I've pretty much prepared all this stuff ahead of time. So let's go ahead and get into this problem. All right, so basically in a nutshell, the operating system has a NIC information from the image being cloned and a new NIC provided after the clone. All right, so what that's saying is more or less that from the previous operating system, or from the previous disk image, which is in my case, if you are, again, just recreating your virtual machine or pulling that disk image back into virtual machine manager where it's manageable, or if there's a clone that you're creating from a virtual machine that you already have up and running, the problem is that there's already been a network interface card configured for that machine. So what happens is that when you clone, or again, in my case, when you recreate that virtual machine based on a previously set up image, you actually, virtual machine manager libvirt doesn't know that there's already, or QEMU doesn't already know, KVM doesn't already know that there's a NIC card for that device, for that virtual machine. So what it does is it creates another one, right? So udev is a device manager for a Linux kernel. So primarily it manages device nodes in the /dev directory. It's the successor to devfs and hotplug, which means that it handles the dev directory and all user space actions when adding or removing devices, including firmware load. And that's directly from Wikipedia. All right, so the first thing we need to do is we need to go into the configuration for our device, right? So even if you run ifconfig, you'll see that Ethernet, S0 is not even present. Just the loopback device is there. So it's kind of weird that we run set service network restart, and it's trying to bring up the interface, then it says not present, right? So that lets us know that there's a script here in etc sysconfig network scripts. There's a script for that, card or that device, right? So there's information that the network daemon is trying to figure out and find and bring back up, reconfigure, however you want to call it, but it's not finding that information. This stuff is not matching up to what is known to the machine, right? All right, so what we need to do is we need to figure out where is this stuff set up at. Where does udev present the information or make available the information so that the network daemon can find and make sure that that device is actually attached to the system and available. All right, and that's going to be in etc. I don't have Vim on this machine, so I'm just running vi rules.d, and there's a couple different items in here. All right, but what we're concerned with is that 70-persistent-net. All right, so 70-persistent-net.rules, and when you open that up, it's pretty much self-explanatory. It says this file was automatically generated by libudev write net rules program run by the persistent net generator.rules rule file. You can modify as long as you keep rule on a single line. Change only the value of the name equals key. All right, so if you look at this, it's pretty clear that there's two devices here, right? But if we ls etc sysconfig network scripts, right, you see that there's only one interface configuration file, and that's for, well, there's two, of course the loopback's always there, but there's only one in terms of NIC cards, network interface cards, and that's ETH0. But again, inside of our udev rules file here, all right, you'll see that there's two. Now the question is, which one of those two do we need? All right, and what you have to remember is that there was already one there previously to us recreating or cloning this virtual machine. So the one that we're concerned with is going to be the second one. Okay, and this is really easy to do. Now, if you, of course, again, you'd have to have had figured this all out on your own, or watch a tutorial like this one, read up on it yourself in order, to kind of know. But me, again, going through that issue, I figured it'd be good to provide the information for others to use and not have to go through all that heartache and pain that I went through to try to figure this out. Because it took me, about an hour or so. So what we need to do is we need to go ahead and we're going to remove the first one, and then we're going to rename um, the name key. Remember, as the comments above say, you can modify it as long as you keep each rule on a single line and change only the value of the name equals key. All right. So we're going to change that to E0, and then there's one more thing we got to do. All right, so we got rid of that, changing that to E0. Now, this is the other thing we have to be mindful of. All right, if you look at this line again, there's something else very unique about it. Matter of fact, let me undo those changes and give you a second. Just look at both the lines and you'll see something that's different between the two of them. Okay, and on some in some instances, you may actually see three, but that third one is really not that important, which would be the virtuo-PCI. There could be a different option there. There could be something different there in terms of how the network interface card is attached to the system. All right, so these two can be different, but again, those are comments, so you don't really have to be mindful of. But what I want to talk about is this right here. All right, and if you've been working with Linux for some time, it looks quite familiar. If not, basically it's a MAC address. All right, it's the MAC address of the network interface card. All right, so let's go ahead and redo our changes. All right, and then we need to remember or either write down, which is what we're going to do over here. We're going to write down what our network interface card number is. All right. All right, so we've done that. Let's go ahead and write and quit. Okay, clear our screen up. All right, so again, as you can see here, so we edited the Etsy udev rules.d70-persistent-net.rules file. All right, again, remember we removed we remove all of the information of the first, and it could be a number, it could be a couple extra depending on how many times you clone this machine. And issues you ran into, it could be more than one there. It could be like 3 or maybe even 4. So in my previous issue, there was actually 3 listed. So what you want to do is you want to remove everything except for the last one. Okay, everything except for the last one if you're running one network interface card on your virtual machine. All right, so once you've done that, and again, you've set your MAC address aside somewhere. All right, the next thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and modify our interface configuration file to make sure that it's set to the same thing in terms of the, and we can just, press the up arrow key to get back to where we were at previously in terms of looking at that file. But again, that's in Etsy sysconfig network-scripts ifconfig-eth0. All right, or eth0, however you want to say it. So looking at this, we can clearly see that our MAC address here, all right, is definitely not the same MAC address here. All right, so we need to fix that. Okay. So let's go ahead and modify this. And I just like to use the capital letters because that's what's used in this file. There's really not a difference. All right. So we've made that change. Now, before you jump the gun and restart network configuration, the first thing you need to do is you need to reload udev, because if we do that, you'll see that it's still saying that it's not present. And this was another stumbling block that I thankfully got over, because I was like, hey, man, I changed the information. Why is this not working? Well, it's not been loaded. Remember, we're talking about udev being, basically um, the daemon that says when you go to your computer, if you were at a physical computer and you took out a network card, and then you plugged it back in, well, you can't just, well, plugged in a different one, your computer may not recognize that, right? So you may have to reboot, okay? Or, um, it, you may have to reboot that service. Basically, what I'm getting to is that you have to restart or reload udev in order to get it to, refresh itself or re-recognize what's attached to the system, right? All right, so in order to do that, you just run start_udev, okay? And you can reload udev right there in memory. And that's, it doesn't take long. It just takes a few moments here. All right, and there it is. It's reloaded. All right, now you can go ahead and restart your network. All right, you see it hasn't failed. It's determined the IP info, and we're good to go. Now, if we ping google.com, there we go. We got a reply. All right. So again, this tutorial was dealing with facing a situation where you're getting an error message from a cloned or a recreated virtual machine. Right here, device F0 does not seem to be present, delaying initialization. Thanks for watching.